Hello, good morning, and welcome to Newsfile. This is your most authoritative news analysis platform, and here on Newsfile, we put Ghana first. We have a special edition focusing on Niger. And as you know, on the 26th of July this year, a coup d'etat occurred in Niger, in which the country's presidential guard detained the president, Mohamed Bazoum. The presidential head of the presidential guard, General Abdurrahman Chiani, proclaimed himself leader of the military junta. As we speak, they are holding the president, and they say they intend to prosecute him. For what exactly? ECOWAS has since been very busy trying to restore democratic regime in Niger. There has been a meeting of ECOWAS army chiefs in Accra, so the world's attention has been here in the capital city of Ghana. Yesterday, the meeting concluded with a bold, straightforward announcement. ECOWAS is ready to strike. That is, if the Nigerian authority, the junta, does not allow diplomacy to prevail. On the international news, you read headlines, including by the CNN, that ECOWAS has announced a D-Day for intervening in Niger. They are right, because that's exactly what the military chiefs are saying. But what is the cause of the widespread opposition to this decision? Ghana, are you in support of your president deploying your military to join in this exercise? The ECOWAS itself is not completely 100% united in this fight. Can they contain a potential war? I'm Samson Ladia-Yanini. We'll be right back to deal with the vexed matters. And we have people at the very top leading the process right here in the studio to answer your every question. We'll be right back. You're welcome back. This is Newsfile. It's your most authoritative news analysis platform, and here on Newsfile, we put Ghana first, and this show is brought to you by the kindest sponsorship of Bank of Africa. Strong as a group and close as a partner, MTN everywhere you go. HSE University, educating ethical and entrepreneurial leaders for Africa. Robert and Sons Optical Services, your comprehensive eye care service provider for 31 years. Europlus, how you get your water matters. Remember, where Europlus goes, water flows. DBS Industries, roofing, Papa Fee, My Way Insurance. Dial *165# on MTN to join My Way today. Cherry Tree Properties. We develop spaces as though we were going to occupy them ourselves. Syntex tanks. It's strong, it's tough, and Flamingo paints. Simply superior. Thanks to Evans Mensah for holding the forts for me last week when I was away. My guests this morning are Ambassador Dr. Abdel Fattah Musa. You know him now since the last 2 days here in Accra. He's a Commissioner, Political Affairs, Peace and Security, Economic Community of West African States. That's ECOWAS. He's the man who led the announcements yesterday on live broadcast on Joy News, stating very unequivocally that ECOWAS was not ready to encourage and entertain needless, endless negotiations. And that even though the diplomatic channels were still open, perhaps after today, which is the 19th of August, they may shut somewhat, because if the guys in Niger do not open themselves up for negotiations for a peaceful process, as it were, diplomatic process, then the army chiefs of ECOWAS have unanimously agreed and have their plan ready. They're only waiting for the heads of states to say, move, and they will hit Niger and restore democracy. So we're asking questions. At what cost? And will that be the best approach? As it appears, the Nigerian junta doesn't appear to be willing to do things otherwise. And of course, they have some support elsewhere. And we're waking up to news of Mali, Burkina Faso sending warplanes to Niger in response to military interventions. We will also be joined by Kojo Opong Nkrumah, who is MP of Fwasi Ayerebi and Minister for Information. He's actually joining us via Zoom. Samuel Okujeto Ablakwa is MP North Tongue and Ranking Member Foreign Affairs Committee of Parliament. Colonel Festus B. Abuaje is retired from the Army. He's the author, conflict and security analyst. He's also consultant on UN-AU joint planning for AUP support operations, UNDP consultant on disarmament, South Sudan, adjunct member, Center on Democratic Transitions, Ghana, and a former member of Save the Children International Military Advisory Group. Professor Kwesi Ening, Director, Faculty of Academic Affairs and Research, Kofi Annan International Peacekeeping Training Center. The last time I engaged him on this show, he wasn't so sure that ECOWAS meant their threat. What does he see today after the defense chiefs have unanimously agreed? Is it unanimous, really? No, I don't think. But those who are at the meeting here in Accra have agreed. Dr. Ken Ahosu, a senior research fellow, head of peace and security studies, and head of PhD programs, Legon Center for International Affairs and Diplomacy, Lesia, University of Ghana, Accra. Seydou Abudu is president, Ghanaian community in Niger. Yesterday, they also staged a protest against what is happening to their president. Smiler Idi Zanze is chairman, Progressive Onion Sellers Association. As you know, the onion that you do need for your food may not be available to you or as you want it because of what is happening in Niger. Gentlemen, good morning. Thank you so very much for making time to join us on Newsfile, this special edition focusing on Niger.
It's a great pleasure.
Great. Good morning.
Samson.
Right. If I may begin with Colonel Festus Abuaje, you have said that there is no justification for ECOWAS's approach and threats to intervene militarily in Niger. What do you mean by that? No justification? The supplementary protocol that they have signed onto Niger as well does not allow military takeovers.
Samson, good morning. And let me say good morning to this very, very well informed, educated panelist. And let me welcome you back from wherever you went that you didn't disclose to us.
Thank you.
Good to have you back. Now, for clarity, I didn't say that, and I haven't said that there is no justification. My argument is that there are very fundamental issues around this intervention that we need to bring to the discourse, the debate. And the most fundamental, from your legal perspective, is the justness of the cause for ECOWAS to intervene in Niger. What we call the just cause, or jus bello, if I pronounce it well. And the basis for that argument is that here we are in a community which has pronounced itself to zero tolerance for any accession to power through unconstitutional means.
First step, and in January 2017, ECOWAS troop entering Gambia to restore democracy, Operation Restore Democracy.
Okay, I make a distinction. There are different types of such military activities. The Gambia one in 2017 was not an intervention. It was a preemptive deployment. Remember, before any soldier set foot in the Gambia, Yahya Jammeh had already left. So that demonstration of the use of force, thanks to the geography of that part of Africa, the Gambia is like the tongue in somebody's mouth, in the mouth of Senegal. So Senegal's presence, per the architecture of the ECOWAS standby force, constituting the Western vanguard, was already in a position to more or less encircle the Gambia, with the exception of, let's say, the Atlantic coast. So that deployment was not an intervention. It's very different. And by the way, it was by a civilian leader who was being recalcitrant, or whatever the English word is. Very different from Liberia, which had been invaded by Chastela through Cote d'Ivoire, and which saw the community divided at the time. So the deployment to Cote d'Ivoire was to counter the invasion under the pretext of going to extricate Ghanaian and ECOWAS citizens. Now, that deployment cannot be compared to the situation in Niger.
Yeah.
And I've already alluded to the argument that out of 14 coups, right? Why have we all of a sudden become very wise that we will not allow Niger to go, if you like, unpunished?
But there must always be a starting point.
Yeah, let me make this point. My argument is that the black ant that the Akans call Nkrani, the village wisdom among the Akans is that when you are in the Nkrani, the black ants, that is not when you pick the black ants. You step aside and then you pick. So the best course of approach currently is to use diplomacy. Then after the dust has settled, you come back, and I'm writing that in my paper, sit down, bring your policy practitioners, bring your experts, bring your politicians, your diplomats together, and then find the reason why there is a resurgence of coups in Ghana, and similarly, why the civilian tendencies towards third term and constitutional re-engineering is also on the increase.
So far, diplomacy doesn't seem to yield much. We are told of the delegation sent by the Nigerian president, ECOWAS, head, and they were not allowed beyond the airports. I mean, to some extent, that's such an insult, isn't it? Because
Samson, everybody that you speak to, there is a playbook for ECOWAS. The ECOWAS playbook is that when you have situations like Niger, which had applied previously in the instances of coups, first of all, you suspend, right? Secondly, you sanction. Thirdly, you engage constructively. And in the ECOWAS books, and I'm asking anybody who wants to read, to go and read the ECOWAS Treaty, Revised Treaty 1993. Read the protocol that we're talking about, 2001. Read the Conflict Prevention Framework 2008. Samson, intervention is not mentioned anywhere. However, there is a provision, what in law you call the omnibus clause, which says that, and any other operation that from time to time the Mediation and Security Council can or will mandate. Now, we should not hide behind that omnibus clause, because in all of these protocols, we talk about enforcement of sanctions. That is not what we're going to do in Niger. We talk about peace building and talk to the experts. Peace building are measures like we are doing, National Peace Council, using chiefs and so on. It's not coercive. You see it. So why are we going to use force, intervention, what we are referring to as a Chapter 7 operation? And meanwhile,
as we understand, we'll get there. As we understand, they don't feel that there's a necessity from their advice from their attorneys. They don't feel there's a necessity to trigger an Article 7 process, and that they can go on by simply informing the UN without requiring their permission to, so to speak.
That is not the case, Samson. The wording of that phraseology, I believe in Chapter 7 or Chapter 8, is that as soon after, but there are circumstances when a country can be aggressed. And when a country belongs to a body like the ECOWAS, an aggression against that state is an aggression against all member states. So your response will be immediate. This is not the scenario that we have. There is time. You see what I mean? He says we have a D-Day. We have not arrived at a D-Day. Because you cannot have a D-Day when you don't have a force commander. The decisions arrived at in Accra per the ECOWAS standby force arrangements and ECOWAS's protocol will now have to go to the Mediation and Security Council for approval. And the Mediation and Security Council is conflated because when we established it, the 50 member states that, like their accounts, when we are two to set a trap, then the two of us must go and inspect the trap. But there are political reasons why they thought that way. Because there are some regional role players who want to be in that equation since inception. As we speak, per the African Union Protocol 2003 that established the Peace and Security Council, you serve 3-year terms twice or 2-year terms twice, then you step aside. Since inception, Nigeria has been a member. Complete violation of the protocol. You cannot belong to a sub-region where you establish core values and principles, and some members are so powerful that they don't be part. They are not part of the.
Thank you very much.
These are some of the fundamental issues.
Right. Kindly hold on there for us. And clearly, Colonel Festus Abuaje is straightforward about his points that there is no just cause, and he has assembled such convincing facts to justify his points. I want to welcome Ambassador Dr. Abdel Fattah Musa, Commissioner, Political Affairs, Peace and Security of the ECOWAS, into the studio. Thank you very much for making time to join us.
No, thank you. It's my pleasure.
Great. So these experts that we are speaking to, members of parliament and so on that we are talking to, almost all of them appear to have questions that you have the answers to. So please be a little patient for me. Let me now go and talk to Dr. Ken Ahosu, Senior Research Fellow, Head of Peace and Security Studies, and the Head of PhD Programs, Legon Center for International Affairs and Diplomacy. Doc, from where you sit, doesn't it appear that what ECOWAS has done so far, particularly with the meeting that ended yesterday of the defense chiefs in Accra, was as a result of diplomacy failing, and therefore they need to show the junta that ECOWAS is capable and ready to use the necessary force? So is there any more room for diplomacy from where you sit?
Well, thank you very much for having me. And it's nice seeing my old-time friends, Dr. Abdel Fattah, Colonel Festus, all of the panel, Kwesi and co. Well, I don't think that the communique from the head of military distance is anything dramatic. If you are abreast with military practice, big states like United States of America always have scenarios when there is a conflict. This is how we will approach it and that sort of thing. And they put costs on it, the resources and that sort of thing. And I think that was largely what happened. What resources do we have? What troops can we contribute? How do we coordinate our communication system, operational standards, and that sort of thing? But the normal thing is that while these blueprints always exist for hotspots, they are not given the kind of publicity that has been given to the Accra Special Conference as it is. My problem with the whole approach with ECOWAS is that with the appointment of Tinubu as the president of ECOWAS or head of whatever that position is, he sounded so bellicose towards coup d'etats, and that set the stage. So once there was a coup d'etat, he has to act in a manner to show that what he has said, he would be able to deliver. And from that perspective, the credibility of ECOWAS was at stake. Now, as Colonel Abuaji was saying, why do you treat Niger case differently? There have been several coup d'etats, and the normal thing is to suspend them, implement sanctions, and give them transition. So why then do you treat Niger differently? But the danger is that, and I'm really, really surprised with my old friend, Dr. Abdel Fattah, but then as Shakespeare says, new governments come upon us, and it's only by wearing them that we become familiar with it. Because there is what?
Dr. Kenansu.
Running away from
Hello, Doc.
intervention globally.
Hello, Doc.
They have been running away from I hope you can hear me clearly.
I can hear you clearly, except
Hello,
that...
can you hear me?
I can hear you clearly, except that we didn't hear your quotation or citation from Shakespeare.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you clearly. I wanted you to repeat.
Hello, can you hear me?
I hear you clearly. I wanted you to repeat what you said, Shakespeare said, and you said that because of the place that your friend finds himself. Now, I'm going to Professor Kwesi, but before we hear him, let's hear part of the announcement after the Army chiefs concluded their two-day meeting in Accra yesterday.
All member states of ECOWAS present here today have all committed elements. They have committed their own equipment. They have committed their own resources to undertake this mission. So I tell you, we are ready to go anytime the order is given. The D-Day is also decided, which we are not going to disclose. There will be no more meetings of the chiefs of defense staff. If there will be, it will be probably in the course of the operation if there is the need to adjust the operation. This is the second extraordinary meeting and the final meeting before deployment.
How clear can we expect them to be? Professor Kwesi, Dr. Ken also said what they did yesterday was not dramatic, but it appears to have attracted a response. And state television in Niger, we understand, is talking about Mali, Burkina Faso sending warplanes to Niger in response to potential military intervention. clear response to what happened in Accra yesterday, isn't it? Prof, kindly unmute your mic.
Some of us are too old for this technology. It's a very clear response, but it is also a necessary response. When you perceive that you will be attacked, of course, you will make the preparations. But I can tell you this, Samson, and let me repeat it. The attack will not happen.
You want to repeat this?
Very clearly. And you know yourself the number of times I've predicted coup d'etats that have come true. So this is about forecasting and risk analysis and risk assessments. The intervention will not happen because ECOWAS needs to reverse or to retract its steps to get part of its credibility back. Let me take a couple of steps back. My dear friend, Dr. Abdel Fattah Musa, in your studio, designed the conflict prevention framework and knows the steps particularly well. So he's in a very hot seat, a very uncomfortable seat. We know that first is suspension. The second is a sanctions regime. All sanctions disproportionately affect the weak and the poor. ECOWAS has put in place such a dramatic draconian sanctions regime in which those who designed it have forgotten the basic mantra, do no harm, to such an extent that the Under-Secretary General of the UN, Griffiths, has had to write a letter to the ECOWAS Commission President reminding him of the humanitarian aspects. Now, that is a slap in the face of ECOWAS. Now, the addressee or who has received that letter is wrong. That letter must go to the chair of ECOWAS, President Tinubu, because he will then discuss with his fellows and it will trickle down. But Dr. Musa, Abdel Fattah Musa, can speak furthermore to this. The military intervention option, it's a necessary tool in the instrument box to give ECOWAS its gravitas and to nudge the regime in Niamey to come round the table. So it is a necessary tool, but it will not be used. That, Samson, I can bet you a bottle of Lagavulin each. Because what ECOWAS is trying to do is to invert, I can see those beautiful smile. That is really very useful, to calm all of us down. ECOWAS is trying to regain a bit of the credibility that it has lost by inverting the conversation. That, okay, yes, now we have put the military in place, but the regime says they want to talk, and therefore we will give them that option. The regime in Niamey already started signaling their willingness to speak more than a week ago, when the Emir of Sokoto went to visit, and they indicated that there's a conversation. Because of the tendency that our elders don't make mistakes and they don't apologize, I am happy that at least we seem to have some leeway towards negotiation. That is very useful. But I think Festus's point about the incranification of dialogue and conflict resolution. And Festus, please put it in your article, the incranification. Because you cannot deal with this whilst you are in the thick of the problem. And you see, when we talk about Niger, the narrative is that, but they are so poor. Poverty has nothing to do with this. Does Niger have options that it can use? And the answer is yes. This huge pipeline going through Niger to Algeria and to the rest of Europe gives the regime a powerful negotiation base. So Samson, for one of the few times that I've spoken to you, I want to look at the options for heading towards peace, and what the negotiation positions can be. ECOWAS needs to regain its credibility and to regain the sense that it is a useful organization that speaks to the people's needs. Samson, we join a group because we share in its values and its norms and principles. When you have an organization in which 4 members have made coup d'etats, Festus mentioned 3 others whose processes towards elections have been faulty. What it means is that a little more than 50% of members of that organization do not believe in the normative frameworks that they have voluntarily signed on to. That leads to issues of credibility. Now, when the organization itself fails to use its own standard operating procedures in responding to these challenges, then ordinary people begin to say, but why this? Why are you using multiple standards to resolve problems that have happened much earlier on? And I'm afraid to say that will happen again. Okay, so it's not that we don't want democracy anywhere. Actually, we are so desperate for democracy to be embedded, and therein lies the onus on our multilateral organization, ECOWAS, to be consistent in the application of the principles and the values inherent in all the protocols and conventions and regulations that we have signed on. Can you imagine something? If Hearts of Oak and Asante Kotoko are playing, and suddenly half of the supporters of Hearts of Oak decide to support Asante Kotoko. I mean, this is very basic. So ECOWAS has a credibility issue that I'm hoping that Niger serves as a lesson to them, but also to all of us. Bellicose language does not help when we are in a crisis situation. We need to bring different parties around the table and start the process of the conversation.
In trying to raise troops for this purpose, Tinubu himself, as the head of this supranational institution, does not have the support of his Senate. So to speak, doesn't have the support of his own people. How significant is this moving forward as ECOWAS intends to?
Oh, it's very significant. And I'm happy you have Honorable Ablakwa in your studio. When we make war commitments, because those commitments are public money, or funding those commitments are public money, that must be accounted for. You need to go to your legislature to get the appropriate support and to get appropriate appropriations. Let's not forget that when even the supplementary budgets are read, you cannot foresee what is going to happen. So when parliaments across the sub-region are doubtful, then that brings another stumbling block. But Samson, Dr. Musa has said that there was almost total buy-in, which I think is a good thing. But it looks to me as if the capitals in West Africa are saying something different from their representatives on the Peace and Security Council in Addis Ababa. Because the Peace and Security Council in Addis Ababa, I think on Wednesday, was very clear that they wanted peaceful processes to resolving this crisis. So there are quite a few stumbling blocks that we need to iron out. Bottom line, look, I've always said this, that Dr. Fattah Musa has the gravitas, the authority, the intellectual heft, and the moral standing to speak truth to power. And my old friend is being tested right now. In the public discourse, he may not be able to diverge. But I know behind closed doors, he has the arguments to do so. He needs to get those who are making these decisions to understand the complexities that Festus has spoken about.
All right.
It's very clear. A lot of the people talking have never read the documents before. Okay, so whilst we want to protect, then we have a responsibility to protect. There's also a responsibility whilst protecting. And we have overlooked that responsibility. And that is why the UN Humanitarian Affairs boss has had to write this letter. That is an unfortunate, criticism of the sanctions regime.
Thank you very much. They got money for wars, but can't feed the poor. Attributed to PAC. Now, let me get to the gentleman in Parliament, and then we'll come to the Commissioner, whom we are so thankful for making time to join us right here in the studio to take your questions. Now, if you're a Ghanaian, we want you to share with us your views of the approach and whether you support your government in the process. So share with us all our social media handles, share with us on Twitter and elsewhere, and we will share with the rest of the world. We know there are people in Niger and elsewhere in the sub-region or in the ECOWAS region who are watching and listening to us this morning. Also let us know what you think, and we will share with the rest of the world. So in Parliament, you don't seem to be agreed that our states should commit to the process. Why not? We are seeking a West African sub-region of leaders who are democratically elected and who are doing things in a democratic dispensation. And as I mentioned earlier, they have signed onto these protocols which don't allow them to do the things they are doing. It doesn't matter that some may not have suffered the approach that Niger is currently, being subjected to. But there must be a starting point where we say enough is enough. Have the support of his Senate, so to speak, doesn't have the support of his own people. How significant is this moving forward as ECOWAS intends to?
Oh, it's very significant. And I'm happy you have Honorable Ablakwa in your studio. When we make war commitments, because those commitments are public money, or funding those commitments are public money, that must be accounted for. You need to go to your legislature to get the appropriate support and to get appropriate appropriations. Let's not forget that when even the supplementary budgets are read, you cannot foresee what is going to happen. So when parliaments across the sub-region are doubtful, then that brings another stumbling block. But Samson, Dr. Musa has said that there was almost total buy-in, which I think is a good thing. But it looks to me as if the capitals in West Africa are saying something different from their representatives on the Peace and Security Council in Addis Ababa. Because the Peace and Security Council in Addis Ababa, I think on Wednesday, was very clear that they wanted peaceful processes to resolving this crisis. So there are quite a few stumbling blocks that we need to iron out. Bottom line, look, I've always said this, that Dr. Fattah Musa has the gravitas, the authority, the intellectual heft, and the moral standing to speak truth to power. And my old friend is being tested right now. In the public discourse, he may not be able to diverge. But I know behind closed doors, he has the arguments to do so. He needs to get those who are making these decisions to understand the complexities that Festus has spoken about.
All right.
It's very clear. A lot of the people talking have never read the documents before. Okay, so whilst we want to protect, then we have a responsibility to protect. There's also a responsibility whilst protecting. And we have overlooked that responsibility. And that is why the UN Humanitarian Affairs boss has had to write this letter. That is an unfortunate, criticism of the sanctions regime. Thank you very much. They got money for wars, but can't feed the poor. Attributed to PAC. Now, let me get to the gentleman in Parliament, and then we'll come to the Commissioner, whom we are so thankful for making time to join us right here in the studio to take your questions. Now, if you're a Ghanaian, we want you to share with us your views of the approach and whether you support your government in the process. So share with us all our social media handles, share with us on Twitter and elsewhere, and we will share with the rest of the world. We know there are people in Niger and elsewhere in the sub-region or in the ECOWAS region who are watching and listening to us this morning. Also let us know what you think, and we will share with the rest of the world. So in Parliament, you don't seem to be agreed that our states should commit to the process. Why not? We are seeking a West African sub-region of leaders who are democratically elected and who are doing things in a democratic dispensation. And as I mentioned earlier, they have signed onto these protocols which don't allow them to do the things they are doing. It doesn't matter that some may not have suffered the approach that Niger is currently, being subjected to. But there must be a starting point where we say enough is enough.
Well, something, let me extend regards to you, to the eminent panel. And thank you for bringing my lost friend back to me, Dr. Fattah.
Yes. Okay.
It's good. It's good to be in the studio with you.
Almost everyone is happy to have him around.
Yes.
But they will be hitting me.
Yeah. Except that his comrades take the view that the position that we all held when we were active on the left. That's not what we are hearing him communicate these days. So he knows that we have some ideological issues.
I think Dr. Kenahosu sought to say, uneasy lies the head that wears the crown.
Yes.
He finds himself in quite a difficult situation.
Yes.
But what must be done ought to be done.
Yes, and what must be done should not depart from principles, should not depart from pragmatism, should not depart from what works. Look, something. This whole matter must be situated within the context of democracy, because it is really a lecture on democracy to Niger, in this instant case, that all of us have committed to deepening our democratic credentials. We do not want ECOWAS to return to the period of coups, where military juntas control political power, and that the popular masses should have the power to elect their leaders and to remove them when they so decide. That our good friends in uniform should focus on security, protecting territorial integrity. That is the framework for this discussion. So I must say ab initio that we are all opposed to military takeovers. Nobody supports coups. I mean, when these coups occur, we in Parliament, we are the first casualties. All coup announcements, you will hear the phraseology, Parliament is hereby dissolved. We will instantly become unemployed. We'll be jobless. So I cannot come here and speak in favor of military takeovers.
So if nobody supports coups, nobody should encourage them and nobody should entertain them.
Exactly. Let's establish that. However, in as much as we do not support coups, we do not support military takeovers, we must recognize that some elements, and you find this happening in ECOWAS time and time again, abuse democratic opportunities. They are not empathetic to the people. They don't use good governance tools. They don't listen to the masses. They even use their democratically elected office to undermine institutions, compromise the judiciary, entrench themselves, engage in what you may want to call constitutional coups. And that has been the bane in the sub-region. You look at the continent today and those who are spearheading this. I heard President Ouattara say that he was the first to announce that his troops are ready. President Ouattara, who is on his third term, who amended his constitution. There was no condemnation. His peers went to his inauguration and congratulated him. Macky Sall is the second leader who has said that he is ready. He has even said that his money is ready, even though he has not gone to Parliament.
I thought he has renounced that.
It's Cape Verde.
Okay.
No,
it's Macky Sall, right?
No.
He's retracted that.
Macky Sall has renounced.
He's renounced that.
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
yeah.
Now he has, yes.
Okay.
So, but he was the second after Ouattara. Now, what is Macky Sall's current democratic credentials? But for, and I must commend Dr. Fattah, appointing Goodluck Jonathan and his colleagues, the West Africa Elders Forum, going to negotiate. He was very close to installing himself as a third-term president. Today, he is delivering lectures to Niger. So ECOWAS has a credibility crisis. I agree with Professor Eni. You see, right from the outset, when ECOWAS was established in 1975, even the host of that establishment conference, General Gowon, was not a Democrat. Few months thereafter, he was overthrown. 6 leaders at that meeting were military dictators. Few years after, 8 other countries had coups. Indeed, if you look at the ECOWAS membership, only 2 countries have not had coups. Only Cape Verde and Senegal. So you can understand the quagmire ECOWAS finds itself in. Credibility crisis, lacking the moral right. All of these countries, when coups happen, the Nigerians will tell you, why was there not an intervention? From, I mean, if you do the counting, since ECOWAS was established in 1975, there has been about 126 coups. Over the last 3 years, there have been 6 coups already. 2 in Mali, 2 in Burkina Faso. So there's a real credibility crisis. And this attempt to now say, you see, we must be hardlined, we must use force, and that will serve as a deterrent. I am afraid. I take a totally different view. I do not think that military intervention is what will stem the tide. Rather, they should look at the causative factors. All of this bad leadership, people using democracy to entrench themselves, to kill their people. Look at how many opposition leaders have been imprisoned in Senegal, how many protesters have been shot in Senegal by a democratically elected leader. Look at the state of unemployment on the continent. Look at the state of corruption. Niger, if you look at all the UN multidimensional poverty analysis, is below the ladder, the poorest, and yet they have uranium. Yet they have this pipeline which others are leveraging to advance their economic interests. And the masses, will you believe that about 80% of the people in Niger don't have access to electricity? Can you believe that? Basic amenities. And only a few elites enjoy. Once they go into these negotiations and their family cronies get a good piece of the pie, the rest can go to hell. Then the elephant in the room, if you look at this new wave of coups, they are all happening in Francophone Africa. We must be honest to have a discussion about the French hegemony in the sub-region. This Charles de Gaulle pact must give way. There is great resentment on the continent against this influence of France. As we all say, the French never left. The Brits, if you look at the decolonization, the disengagement, they left fully, we became Republican status and all of that. You can't say the same of the French. And the masses are rebelling. One factor that these ECOWAS leaders haven't considered is look at the level of popularity. If anybody tells you that these coups are not popular, look, I have friends in Niger. I have done my own independent analysis because I know that during these times there's a lot of propaganda. Talk to people on the ground, talk to ordinary people. It was the same in Mali, the same in Burkina Faso. So what is democracy really? Isn't it about what the masses want, what the majority want? So we must have a discussion about that French hegemony. And France itself, and I noticed that in the early days of President Macron, he tried to offer a new partnership, some new framework, but he has not been deep and far-reaching. That discussion must be held. Look at the demonstration in Niger and the chants. But I must add, though, that in as much as a Pan-Africanist, I am against any form of oppression, any form of colonization. I denounce what is happening now, where people are chanting down with France and yet are flying Russian flags. Don't move from one master to another. We must find a Pan-African solution to our economic crisis. We must have an African solution. In as much as I will criticize this whole French hegemony, I also don't want a new Russian hegemony or a new Russian empire to be created. And that is why I must condemn the role of Wagner in all of these coups. And you see the Wagner leader already pledging support. But now back to Parliament. We are opposed to this military intervention because fundamentally, we are appalled at how heads of states treated our Parliament. They rushed to go and make this July 30 declaration, we are going to intervene. Then 10th August, they did the same, without engaging our parliaments. Nigeria took strong exception. Their senators on their own. It wasn't even President Tinubu who went there with his plan in Niger. They, as a Senate, decided to discuss this matter and pass a resolution. And that was a slap in the face of Tinubu. It was embarrassing. And already, many have followed. All the northern governors have issued statements that they don't support this deployment. How is he going to do this deployment without the support of the Nigerian people? We've seen
looking at the border, and the direct impact on Nigeria. The northern
and the control of these northern governors.
Yes, the northern senators are concerned because there are about 4 or how many 6 states within Nigeria that directly is impacted.
And they are virtually the same people, cousins, relatives, intermarriages, and all of that. It's going to be so complex. Senegal, same. Their parliament had to delve a blow to Macky Sall. So you are lecturing Niger on democracy. You yourself, you are not practicing democratic credentials. You should have engaged your parliaments before you go and make a final determination. Carry the people along. That is why you see that these leaders have been left alone. This is a very unpopular decision. Go to the streets of Africa.
Leaders are allowed to take decisions and seek ratification, so to speak.
Even that, Under Article 75, we know how the ratification must be sought. The Gitmo decision is very clear. Have they done that? Parliament is being treated with contempt. We are now, amongst us, discussing, we want to go the Nigerian way, discussing activating Order 38 of our standing orders so that 15% of MPs can trigger a recall of Parliament, and then the Speaker will be forced
when
to,
I use
within 7 days.
ratification, I'm talking in the loose general business sense of, say, company law.
Okay.
Where because you have a CEO, they have to deal with certain things under certain emergencies. You give them a certain room to operate.
But you see,
then they come back to you and say, I have gone to commit to ABC. I suppose that this should be in the interest of this country. Please now give me the power to continue. So when you have a fluid situation and they go for meetings and take these decisions, you don't say that is so wrong. They need to first come and seek parliamentary, sort of approval before they are able to. Otherwise, they will be robotic.
You see, let's not make excuses. You see, we are talking about democracy, how we want to entrench and deepen democracy. We have seen what happens in all over the place, best practice. When last year the Russians invaded Ukraine, we saw how all Ukraine's Western allies, immediately they convened their parliaments. It's not in their constitutions even expressly. Some of those countries don't even have written constitutions, like the UK. But best practice, democracy, you must engage the people. Immediately they convene meetings. All the support that has gone to Ukraine, the $75 billion from the US Congress has approved every peso. The House of Commons, the over 12 billion pounds that has gone to Ukraine. Every pound, every penny approved by the House of Commons. All the EU countries, the 35 billion euros, pardon me, all approved by EU member parliaments.
Exactly my point. So this is not happening before the action.
No, it happened before they went there. But I'm saying that even if it could not happen before because of the exigencies of time, they have been back since the 30th of July.
That's right.
What are they waiting for? Article 75 is very clear. The president may execute or cause to be executed treaties, agreements, or conventions in the name of Ghana. A treaty, agreement, or convention executed by or under the authority of the president shall be subject to ratification by A, act of parliament, or B, a resolution of parliament supported by the votes of more than 1/2 of all members of parliament. So Article 75 is very clear. The Gitmo decision is very clear by our Supreme Court. What is the president waiting for? And that is why when the ministers of national security, defense, the interior, and foreign affairs appeared before the Joint Committee of Foreign Affairs and Interior and Defense, we made clear that we expect them to call a plenary meeting and present to us whatever agreement, whatever plan they have for Niger. The other matter relates to the finances. We have heard all kinds of fantastic figures in excess of $2.7 billion. I have here the budget approved for this year. The contingency vote for Ghana is 1.4 billion cedis, but we slashed it by half. What was finally approved was about 700 million. Knowing the spending patterns of this government, I know that 700 million, not much is left already. So they cannot hide under the contingency vote. They would have to come to Parliament. When are they going to come to Parliament? Are they going to spend without parliamentary approval? That is a gross violation of Article 178 of the Constitution. And we are not going to accept that. So we are trying to lecture others on democracy. Let us act democratically. Then you see, there are also serious logistical issues that have to be discussed. I have heard from reliable sources that they need a force of not less than 50,000 troops. Dr. Fatai is here, can confirm or deny. I know that some of these tactical things may not be spoken
We'll ask him that.
So far, we have just about a pledge of 800 to 1,100 from Ivory Coast. If you really look at ECOWAS today, it's Nigeria, Ghana, Senegal, Ivory Coast. When we decided to set up the security fund to support the Accra initiative, to fight the extremists, the insurgents who are taking over the sub-region, Only 2 countries contributed. Nigeria, $20 million, Ghana, $5 million. The rest say we should give them time. So Nigeria is stretched already with Boko Haram. Tinubu doesn't have support. Ivory Coast, they say they can do only 1,000. Senegal, I know that they have received a juicy offer from the Americans to send their troops to Haiti to support the American intervention there, because Haiti is totally getting out of control. They are likely to accept that. That's left with Ghana. How are we going to get those numbers? So even logistically, practically. So I think that there's been a lot of us. I think Professor Enin put it very nicely, that in Africa, elders don't make mistakes, elders don't get it wrong. So we are just seeing, it's a lot of half and puff, honestly. I don't see how financially. And you see, Dr. Fattah made a statement that, you know, we are going to fund this ourselves, but if our partners or allies want to support us, well, that's up to them. I really would have wished that ECOWAS declares directly, unequivocally, that we will not welcome support from anywhere because of the nature of this crisis. Look, we are going to face a geopolitical proxy battle on our hands.
We'll deal with that aspect of it too as well.
And if I can just conclude in 30 seconds. So, if you receive money from the French, what is their interest? How is this going to be seen by the Russians and by all those other countries who are having tensions? Algeria, Libya, and all these insurgents who have issues, you know, with the French. So look, we are in a very difficult place. The only option is to go according to the wisdom of Article 40C of Ghana's constitution. Article 40C is very clear that in its dealings with other nations, the government shall promote respect for international law, treaty obligations, and the settlement of international disputes by peaceful means. That is the advice in our constitution, that we should use peaceful means. So we come back to the use of diplomacy, constructive dialogue. That is our best option in this matter. Peaceful means, as the Ghanaian constitution admonishes.
Thank you very much. And that was Samuel Kudjeto Ablakwa. We will speak to Kojo Opon Nkrumah, the information minister, and then I will take time for the commissioner to answer all their questions that they raise. I see him taking notes as is required of him. And we want you to continue to send in your messages. We have some of them we'll share with you. Do you support military intervention in Niger? And why not? Do you want your government to commit to such a process? We'll take a quick break. We'll be right back.
Final meeting before deployment.
Right, so we continue with the discussion, and you just heard Ambassador Dr. Abdel Fattah Musa, Commissioner, Political Affairs, Peace and Security of ECOWAS. Earlier, you heard Colonel Festus Abuaji, retired, author, conflict and security analyst, consultant on UN and AU joint planning for AU Peace Support Operations, UNDP consultant on disarmament, South Sudan, among others. Professor Kwesi Enin, you heard him also, Director, Faculty of Academic Affairs and Research, Kofi Annan International Peacekeeping Training Center. Dr. Ken Ahosu is also the man you heard. He's Senior Research Fellow, Head of Peace and Security Studies, and Head of PhD Programs at Lesia, Lagos.